next question. What were the types of learning that you experienced in and outside of the classroom? Did you travel or work on research with a group of other students? Did you travel or work on research with natives? And I know a couple of you had mentioned doing research. Abby, you mentioned researching. Gretchen, you mentioned researching. So if Abby, you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so hold on, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
So the types of learning you did, the types of research you did, who did you do your research with, and
Right.
how was that integrated into your study abroad?
Yeah, so we kind of we learned in a classroom, like a traditional classroom, when we were staying at the boarding high school. We learned kind of on the go, where we would take educational trips to like different historical landmarks in the country. We did go on safari, so that was exciting as a zoology major. Um, and we learned a lot from the like guides that we had there. We learned a lot from like museums. We did talk to local people all the time. I mentioned already that my research project is with like local Maasai people. So having an what are they called? A translator there where I could speak to them about some of the conflicts with like Western conservation practices that they've had was really neat for me, and it was different than what you think of, just like kind of popping that American bubble. You often forget what it's like for other people around the world. So we were very hands-on learning, really. We kind of just learned everywhere in the bus, wherever we had class.
Yeah. Gretchen, can you also speak to this?
Yeah, so for my program, I actually did get credit for my internship through my program, and I pretty much was doing I was working in a lab that did research sampling for other groups. So I did like DNA testing of like the sex of like a bird, or also like testing the DNA of cheese and seeing which one was a contaminant in like a filter. So it spanned very widely what I was doing, but I also was like able to have like a more enhanced learning, like not Spanish in the context of just conversation and just like living in general, but also research. So that was very interesting as well. And I also like was able to learn that like English is still like the most common language when you're doing research. So it doesn't even matter that my professor I was working with could not speak English, but she could write it perfectly. So that was also something I learned as well. And in terms of like learning on the go, at least in my program, I took a class on like the Arabic world in Spain. And so when I went to southern Spain on like the school trip, I was able to like see everything I was learning about. I was able to see like the mosques, the cathedrals, the Alhambra, which is the most beautiful palace you could ever walk into. So kind of like learning simultaneously while I was there, because like I already knew the all information. I already knew the information when I was going there on the tour, so that was very cool because it was like simultaneous. And in terms of like my own travel, I went to Portugal, Morocco, and Italy. And in terms of like my program, we didn't have class on Fridays, so it was more like so encouraged that to travel on those 3-day weekends. So that was nice to be able to take advantage of.
I'm so jealous that you got to see the Alhambra. It's definitely on my bucket list. Haley, did you do any research, or what types of learning did you have while you were in Ecuador?
I think it's also similarly been kind of a mix of things. I didn't necessarily have a particular research project, but again, it was mixed classes with mainly within my program with the other American students that IES Abroad facilitated. And then I had a literature course at the university in Quito that was completely in Spanish. But then we got to take kind of learning trips to the Amazon, the Galapagos Islands, and experience that. And similarly, on your weekends, you travel. And so that was just a learning experience in that I learned pretty quickly. I'm a pretty type A person. And I learned pretty quickly that you go with the flow. You just you figure it out as you go along. You show up at the bus station, buy your tickets, you figure out your hostel when you get there. And that was like completely unlike anything that I would have ever imagined myself doing. So even just learning about yourself in that context of you will be fine if you do things completely differently than what you're used to. Those were kind of all the different types of learning experiences I had. And same with like the service learning that was more when I was working in the botanical garden. That wasn't with any other American students. So that was more working with locals. And so it was a good blend of different types of learning experiences.
I completely get you on the being a type A person. And all the Brazilians were like, no, like we'll show up when we show up. And it was a learning experience for sure. Tommy, Katie, did either of you want to comment on research that you did while you were abroad or the types of learning you had, if you traveled?
Yeah, so I really like the way they kind of like did everything down there in terms of university, and so I actually was able to schedule all my classes to only be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I had a 4-day weekend every week, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was kind of all day. So that was kind of sometimes not the best. But so it was cool because two of my classes, one was based on 2-week-long field trips. So it's really cool to see how they did that. It was so relaxed where like we went and we stayed at a Boy Scout camp essentially. And like we all did our own cooking and dishes and everything. And it was definitely rough in it. And it was pretty cool to see, but like everyone was kind of in it together and you're with your professors and everything. So that was really cool. You spent a lot of time with them. So you always have the opportunity to ask questions because you're no service in the middle of the mountains, like a 6-hour hike in or out. So that was always really cool. And that's something I really valued about going abroad. And then obviously for geology, saying they have is kind of the best geologist is the one that sees the most rocks. So all my teachers back at OU were very encouraging when I wanted to kind of bend my classes around, and they saw that these field courses were going to be more valuable than any lab course I could have like stayed and done volcanology. I missed out on that, but and this is kind of touching on the last question too. I didn't really get in there, but so yeah, so that was one class based on like 2-week-long field trips and then a couple other small ones, and that was all like field techniques and like how to really be a geologist and kind of take the data that you need. And then another class I took was smaller field trips, and it was we went around and we investigated kind of like all the hydrothermal generation on the island because they have a lot of rivers and big dams. And then we also looked at their mining operations on the island. There's a lot of gold around, so a lot of really cool field trips like that where we got to like take a bus, few hours, hike, camp out. And then just kind of like a couple days where you're always with your professors. So that was cool. And then all my classes ended up with like finals in the end where for like the whole last month of school, we were just kind of studying. And so that's where I really tried to like kind of buddy all the natives because they kind of knew what the deal was with these tests that I was studying for 2 weeks. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I also joined a canoe polo team, and that was all Kiwis. So that was cool. It's kind of mingling with the natives.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I have not studied, well, I did my senior year of high school, but I haven't done my OU study abroad yet. So I'm very excited to get in on this and all of the interactions. So for my next question, how has living abroad shaped your outlook on the US? And Katie, if you want to start this.
Yeah, so it was definitely interesting, especially with environmental issues. a lot of the international students would talk about the United States and we would have discussions in class. And this was in 2018, so obviously the United States is not doing the best in regards to environmental policy internationally. So it's always interesting talking with other international students, not just about environmental issues, but it seemed like American students got the most questions from international students. At least that was my experience. There was always, sometimes it'd be making fun of the United States, or sometimes it's just like genuine questions about how our life worked and like what was going through our minds. A lot of it was political, but just in general. So definitely being an American abroad is an interesting experience. It's an eye-opening experience. You kind of realize that the United States is not the center of the world, and lots of things go on outside of it. Even if a lot of people know what happens in the United States, it seems like a lot of Americans don't necessarily know what's happening outside the United States. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that was my biggest realization when I was abroad was, wow, the US is not the center of the world and I know nothing about the world around me. So yeah, it's eye-opening to say the least. Abby, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Katie said. My experience was interesting because I was in an African country, and just realizing like they have no concept of race there, like it's not a thing. And here, I mean, yeah, it's a hot mess. So it was really an eye-opener for me, because we also had a very mixed group. So there were 10 of us, and there were half of us were white, half of us were Black, and I think Wit is from Thailand. So it was a very interesting experience, even to be a Black person like in an African country. I agree. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see like another country's perspective on like American life, like especially, I mean, race was brought up a lot, obviously. They sound like a lot of people that we interact with really thought like they would see our like very mixed group and would ask us all the time like if we hated each other and like why are we in this group together, because some of us are white and some of us were Black. They also they didn't understand why we kept saying Black. So it was just a really a different experience to grow up your whole life in an American country that loves to separate you by your skin color, and then to go somewhere in a country in Africa where that's just not even, it's not a thing. They see you as an American, not whether you're Black or white or whatever. So that was the most probably eye-opening experience to me. I went the freaking fall after Donald Trump was elected, so there was also a lot of political questions, and they love Obama over there, so that was that was an interesting comment I got all the time. So yeah, I would say that I agree a lot with what Katie said, and I think it shed a lot of light on a lot of the problems that America has with the way that or the US, I shouldn't say America, with a lot of the problems that US has with their, I don't even know what to call it, social structures, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I completely understand. Anybody else want to comment on that, how their outlook on the US has changed from experiences abroad?
Yeah, I was actually surprised how much news coverage was going on about things going on in the United States while I was in Ecuador. And I was also there at a weird time, fall 2012. It was a presidential election year. I was there during Sandy Hook, during Hurricane Sandy, and just having really interesting conversations, especially with Sandy Hook. I remember very distinctly of my host family, we were just glued to the TV watching this, and they just couldn't like, how does this happen? Why? Because it's so strange. And I remember too having discussions about the election where people were saying, well, of course Obama's going to win. Like, it seemed like a given that it was going to be a landslide, and they just didn't realize how close our elections tend to be, and that kind of political division there. But I also was surprised for some reason. I think I went expecting that people would dislike people from the United States, or that we have this stereotype for being loud and self-important and whatever else. But I actually talked to people, not only Ecuadorians, but other people that happen to be there, expats or other people traveling abroad, that thought pretty highly of the States. So sometimes I found myself in conversations where people were giving praise to this country that I wasn't expecting. And so it was just a really interesting place to be, to engage in those sorts of conversations, especially coming for a lot of people from a place of genuine curiosity. It's not that you're walking on eggshells as much as you are here. So almost it's an opportunity to have more open conversations.
I'd like to just also add a little bit in terms of Spain. I think the biggest difference I saw was just the general lifestyle of people, because in Spain, like they call it like Spain time, where like everyone is like literally late for everything, and it's fine. Nobody gets mad. I mean, I had a class at night and my professor was late about 15 minutes every single time, but that's just how it went. And they also are, at least in Spain particularly, and in Salamanca where I was, my host mom and the locals I interacted with were very relaxed. They weren't, I would say, slow or lazy. They just they were just happier people too. They weren't running from one thing to the next or had their lives packed with activities I feel like Americans feel like they have to have. So that was almost like a breath. Even though I had work and I was studying for the GRE, I felt like so much less pressure than in terms of like hearing about everything else that's going on in the United States. So yeah. And also the only thing, like what Haley was touching on, I was a bit afraid going abroad and thinking like, oh, people are not gonna like Americans, and I was prepared to say I was Canadian and like had a whole story and everything, but I really didn't have any like qualms. Like, people really like, oh, you're from America? Like, they were very excited and happy. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. But also just in terms of like the people there in general, they're all very short and I'm not. So I think that was just something too that made me stand out and afraid that I would look American or Dutch or somewhere else.
Yeah, I went to Brazil in 2018, 2019, and it was an election year for them. And so that was very interesting for me. It was exciting. As someone who's interested in politics, it was really fun for me, but I understand now that the Amazon is on fire. So yeah, that's about how it was.
I thought it was really interesting how interested everyone was with America, and like they're like, oh, what do you think about Trump? And they all wanted to get the Americans' kind of opinion. And they were some of the kids I hung out with were very interested about the gun laws. They were like, oh, that's incredible. And I'm like, yeah, and it's kind of an issue. So that was kind of like interesting. But one thing that was pretty cool is they were all like, they thought the idea of America was so cool. And like a lot of them, it was weird. A lot of them were like, we want to go to Texas. I'm like, Texas? Like, what? Go to like LA or something. I don't know. Like, I mean, Texas is cool, but like every single person was like, yeah, Texas looks so cool on TV. So it's I was kind of questioning what their actual perception is and whether they just get that off like TV. And so like, that was kind of a funny thought. And I was like, I don't know. For me, there would be a couple places I would go before Texas. Definitely some good barbecue, but yeah. So that was just kind of a funny touch. And then a less funny note was I was actually there when there was the shooting in Christchurch, which was terrible. But what was really cool to see how the entire country just came together immediately. And for the remainder of the time I was there, it was all love. And it was incredible to see how they really embraced the Muslim community and then kind of just brought everyone together as a whole. So that was like very touching. And then it was also really cool to see how they kind of like had a gun buyback right away, and they kind of really made change off one incident like that. So that was sad, but it was cool to see how they reacted and embraced that.
Yeah, no, that had to have been incredible, but eye-opening, and yeah, no, really, really exciting. Not exciting, but very interesting stuff.
I should have led off with that and then gone to the thing about Texas. That probably would have been better.
Brazilians were not interested in Texas, but they were very interested in Americans. They were very interested in our gun laws, though. I mean, every person asked me, "Does your family have guns? Do you have guns in your house?" Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Yes, we do have guns in our house. Welcome to America. Yeah, little things like that, just the interactions you get with natives is very eye-opening to the various cultures, but super fun, just little things stick in my head. So for my next question, in what way has your international experience impacted your professional life and career choices? And if Katie, you want to start that on?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good answer. I'm still in grad school, so it really isn't, I'm not really out in the full career world yet, but oh man, can you come back to me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Haley, since you are in the career field, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of it I've already touched on a little bit. Like it looks good on a resume. And if you're going for a language, you never know when a language skill is going to come in handy. And so in my current job, I don't have tons of interaction with Spanish speaking patients. I really wish I did. But it's still a good thing, a good skill set to have in your back pocket. And also, since I'm seeing patients sometimes from different cultures whose families come from different parts of the world, there's just a broader perspective that you bring, and having, like I said, some cultural competency. Because sometimes I think, especially in the States, probably because of how big it is and how hard it can be to travel, for so many people that don't get that opportunity, you don't know what you don't know. If you've never left this country, you don't know anything else. You have the internet, you can read, but there's really not as good a substitute as going somewhere and experiencing a different culture. And that can be applied pretty broadly. So again, the Spanish skills right now aren't super applicable, and maybe that's just because I'm still in Ohio. Who knows? But I think just the general usefulness of again putting yourself outside your comfort zone and trying something new and getting to see something in a different part of the world.
That was worded so eloquently. Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts on this? Were there any steps towards grad school that this helped with? Did you talk about, your experiences abroad in your essays?
So for me, I actually I wasn't sure if I was going to try and go right into trying to get a job, or if I was going to try and go to grad school or something. And then as I kind of got towards the end of senior year, or so end of junior year, or beginning of senior year, end of senior year, I was like kind of getting tired of the whole school thing. I was like, I'm really getting sick of doing homework. But I think after going to a school where we had grad students teaching us for some of the lectures, and they were helping us with our labs, and just seeing the way they kind of lived, I think that was actually really eye-opening for me, because I kind of am looking at grad school differently, because not only can I use it to further my studies and somewhere that I'm very interested in studying, which is kind of why I'm holding off. I want to wait till I really figure out what I want to dive into. But I'm also looking at it as a way as to go and live somewhere else again, like I did for my study abroad. I just thought it was really cool. I was really good friends with a kid who was from the Bronx, and he was one of our teaching assistants down in New Zealand. So like I didn't know. So I think without that experience, what I'm trying to say is that I wouldn't as strongly be considering grad school right now. But I am working right now, so I'm in no rush. So.
I think I could add something to this also. So I'm in grad school right now still too, so I'm not in the professional world, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm gonna do after my master's. First of all, I have no idea. But when you study animals, you obviously, conservation's a big part of it. You want to make sure that the animals you're studying are here in 10 years or whatever. And I think especially studying abroad in an African country, a lot of American researchers love like African wildlife, and they feel very strongly about wanting to protect them. But a lot of the things that I learned over there is that the native people aren't really included in that at all. When really they've been the ones interacting with these populations and really studying their behavior, just not like formally in a research setting. And so I think it's really important, if I ever get my dream job of like working for a conservation agency and traveling the world like someday, that you like, I think doing the study abroad really helped me understand like the Western conservation practices are just kind of exclusive, and we should listen more to native people, especially when you're dealing with animals that these native people probably know a lot more about. So
Yeah, I could say a few more, just more on like more of the soft skills you learn abroad. So like at OU, you live in a dorm, you have your meal plan. So when I studied abroad, this is like the first time I had to like live on my own and go out and go to the grocery store and actually like be responsible for myself. And I really learned how to be more independent, especially since the classes I took, their teaching style is very informal. You're kind of expected to learn on your own. Like they give you a bunch of readings. They expect you to just want to learn and just do the work on your own. So those are just good kind of soft skills, how to be independent, responsible, organized, that maybe the American college system doesn't teach us as well. So that was one thing.
And all of those skills are really important just moving forward in life. And on the topic of life, how have your international experiences shaped your personal life and the choices you've made? And that really, I mean, anybody want to start that out? Those who are in grad school, were you thinking about grad school before? Was this a big turning point for you?
I can say something. So when I was abroad, ironically enough, I was applying to grad school. So I was studying for the GRE, doing my applications, getting recommendations. So that was an interesting experience. I definitely recommend don't study abroad when you're applying to grad school. It kind of takes away from the experience of both. But nevertheless, I still really enjoyed going to Spain and my experience there. But I'm sorry, what was the question again? I kind of went on a tangent.
How it impacted your personal life. But yeah, feel free to do with that what you will.
Yeah. So I think it definitely helped me adapt. I think just a common theme throughout this discussion has been just opening your mind until you actually get somewhere. Just because, I mean, I had so many ideas of what I thought Spain would be, how I would be treated. And most of the times my inclinations were wrong. And those judgments, can be very well misleading to like your preparations. So I mean, the attitude I was coming to Spain was very different than what I left, in terms of just appreciating that there are people different than Americans, but also hoping that the country we live in may adapt to being more welcoming to immigration and other people, because right now we're really not. So that really made me definitely more mad at the current political state, just because when I was abroad, that was something not brought up as much as me compared to other people, but still like realizing that it's not even an issue, because like they share so many, like Spain shares a border with Morocco and Portugal, and it's not even thought of as like these people cannot come here. So yeah.
I can speak on it a little too. So I studied abroad the first semester of my sophomore year. So I was like, I'm getting this bachelor's on, I'm out. I'm sort of God, I'm done with school, and now I'm in grad school. But when I came back, I really wanted to double major then in Black World Studies and zoology, but I didn't end up doing that because I actually graduated a semester early and I would have had to stay. And turns out COVID would have ruined that last semester for me anyway. So I'm kind of not regretting that choice right now. But my personal life, it's really, it makes it, I've done very few things after that has like lived up to the time that I've had there. So I think about it all the time and I just want to talk about it all the time. My family's like sick of it. But I'm going to get a little personal, but my father actually passed away and it was like his lifelong dream to go to any country in Africa, really. So the fact that I did that kind of fulfilled like a very personal goal, I guess, a personal spot in my heart, especially. I feel that way a lot about all the travel things I did at Ohio Wesleyan. Like very few things have lived up to like those times in my life. So I think now I'm just spending like my whole life trying to like be as happy as I was in those moments, because nothing like really lives up to that. So it has a good, like, my life is forever changed. So
Yeah,
Can I hear that question one more time? Sorry.
Absolutely. How have your international experiences shaped your personal life and the choices you have made?
So kind of way it shaped my personal life is one day when I was in New Zealand, I was realized like I kind of had like a month left or something. And I looked around, I was like, wow, I'm really gonna miss these guys. And so one thing I started doing, which really helped me with the abrupt ending that was our senior spring because of COVID this past spring, I started doing like an email a month, where it doesn't have to be an email, that's just what I call it, but I make sure that I reach out to everyone on this list at least once a month. And it's not limited to obviously only once a month, but it's just I have a day where if I get to that day, I'm like, oh, I don't think I've talked to them. If it's even in question, I'll send them a message or something. So that was kind of that was good. Something cool that I kind of figured out while I was down there. And like I said, it really helped me with this last spring and everything. And then another, just how it's shaped the choices I made. I don't know. There's just this weird like yearning feeling to go back down there. The little island on the other side of the world. So definitely been saving money in weird spots to kind of try and plan the next time I get back there. And so it hasn't really directly affected many choices yet, but I think if New Zealand was ever in question for a decision down the road, it's going to be a tough one, because I'm definitely going to want to go down there.
I just want to say for me, I totally agree with what Abby said about how everything kind of, you want it to live up to your study abroad experience. But for me, I feel like I gained a lot of confidence during my study abroad time. I would say generally I'm like shy, introverted person, but I had wanted to study abroad for so long. So when I got there, I was just so like, I wanted to make it the best I could. So I just put myself out there. I made a lot more friends than I'd ever expected to make. And I think once I did that, it has helped me and just in general in life to become more confident and willing to kind of want to put myself out there more.
Yeah, just to echo what Abby said, I mean, I definitely think that was the peak of everything. I mean, it was incredible. Anywhere in the world is just incredible to step outside of your comfort zone. Um, I can't wait to go back. But like Tommy, we'll get there one day. I think one of the biggest things it changed in my life was the focus on family, because Latin America in general is so focused on the family and on, you have your mom and your dad and you have, lunch with your grandparents every single Sunday, and Saturday nights you see them. Like, it was very family oriented, and that's not something that we put a heavy emphasis on, especially after the age of, high school age. So it really changed my perspective on that when I came home, and even my parents noticed it. They were like, wow, you want to spend time with us? And yes, I do. I learned how to spend time with you.